The mysterious alchemists of ancient times, hunched over bubbling retorts and cryptic manuscripts, weren't merely attempting to transform physical lead into gold. Have you ever sensed that behind the chaotic appearance of our world lies a hidden order, universal laws governing all existence? Throughout history, select individuals have discovered these secrets, passing them through generations in whispered traditions and cryptic texts. Among these, one stands paramount: the Kybalion. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these, understandingly, possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. This powerful declaration begins a remarkable journey into ancient wisdom that has guided countless seekers across millennia. The Kybalion, a mysterious text published in 1908 and attributed only to the 3 initiates, distills the essence of Hermetic philosophy into 7 fundamental principles that explain the very nature of reality itself. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts gathering dust on forgotten shelves. They're living keys to understanding the mechanisms of existence. Practical tools for navigating life's complexities and mastering what the ancients called mental transmutation. This profound art enables the transformation of one's mental states, circumstances, and ultimately, reality itself. What makes these principles so extraordinary is their universal application. They operate whether you're aware of them or not. Much like gravity affects everything regardless of our understanding or belief in it. By consciously working with these principles rather than unconsciously being worked upon by them, you gain unprecedented agency in your life. As we explore each principle, you'll recognize patterns you've intuited but perhaps couldn't articulate. You'll discover how your thoughts create ripple effects throughout your reality. Most importantly, you'll learn to harness these universal laws deliberately rather than being unconsciously subject to their influence. The wisdom contained in the Kybalion transcends time, culture, and spiritual tradition. It speaks to fundamental truths echoed in modern quantum physics, psychology, and even business success strategies. By understanding these 7 principles, you'll gain insights that illuminate life's challenges, reveal hidden opportunities, and unlock your potential to shape reality in alignment with your deepest intentions. Now, let us begin our journey into the ancient Hermetic wisdom, starting with the fascinating origins of this remarkable text. Chapter 1. The Secret Legacy of Hermes Trismegistus. Imagine standing in the great library of Alexandria over 2,000 years ago, surrounded by scrolls containing the accumulated wisdom of antiquity. Among these treasures were texts attributed to a legendary figure known as Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice greatest Hermes. Who was this enigmatic sage whose teachings would profoundly influence Western thought for millennia? Hermes Trismegistus represents a fascinating synthesis of Egyptian and Greek wisdom traditions. The ancient Egyptians knew him as Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic, the keeper of divine knowledge. The Greeks identified him with their messenger, god Hermes. As these cultures merged during the Hellenistic period, so too did these deities, creating the syncretic figure we now know as Hermes Trismegistus. Not considered literally divine, but a great sage who had achieved perfect understanding of the universe. The honorific thrice greatest speaks to his mastery of the 3 parts of universal wisdom: alchemy, the transformation of matter; astrology, understanding cosmic patterns; and theurgy, divine magic or spiritual practice. His teachings formed the foundation of what we now call Hermetic philosophy, a profound system of thought that influenced everything from Neoplatonism to medieval alchemy, Renaissance magic, and modern esoteric movements. While scholars debate whether Hermes was a historical figure or a composite representation of many teachers, his attributed writings, the Hermetica, undeniably shaped Western esoteric tradition. These texts weren't publicly accessible for centuries, transmitted only through mystery schools and initiatory lineages that preserved their wisdom through carefully guarded oral traditions and symbolic writings. Fast forward to 1908, when a slim volume titled The Kybalion appeared, authored only by the 3 initiates. This mysterious text claimed to distill the core Hermetic teachings into 7 fundamental principles. The identity of these authors remains one of the great enigmas in esoteric literature. Many scholars believe William Walker Atkinson, a prominent New Thought writer, was the primary author, possibly collaborating with others in the New Thought movement. Yet the book's wisdom transcends any single author's perspective, suggesting deep familiarity with authentic Hermetic traditions. The Kybalion stands as a bridge between ancient Hermetic teachings and modern understanding. While earlier Hermetic texts were often deliberately obscure, written in symbolic language to preserve their secrets from the uninitiated, the Kybalion presents these concepts in accessible prose for the modern seeker. It strips away cultural trappings while preserving the essential philosophical core. What makes the Kybalion particularly remarkable is how it contextualizes Hermetic philosophy within broader esoteric traditions. The 7 principles echo concepts found in Buddhist philosophy, Vedantic teachings from India, Jewish Kabbalah, Christian mysticism, and Sufi wisdom. This suggests these principles represent universal insights discovered independently by contemplatives across cultural boundaries. Different paths leading to the same mountain peak of understanding. Why do these ancient teachings remain relevant today? Because they address fundamental questions about the nature of mind, reality, consciousness, and our place in the cosmos. As quantum physics reveals the observer effect and the wave-particle duality of matter, we find echoes of the principle of mentalism. As systems theory examines how patterns repeat across scales of existence, we see the principle of correspondence at work. The Kybalion doesn't ask for blind faith or unquestioning acceptance. Instead, it invites practical application and personal verification. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, as the saying goes. These principles gain meaning not through intellectual debate, but through lived experience and application. As we transition to exploring the first principle, remember that the journey through Hermetic wisdom isn't merely academic. It's experiential. A path of transformation that begins with understanding the most fundamental principle of all, that the universe itself is fundamentally mental in nature. Chapter 2, All is Mind, the foundation of reality. Have you ever stopped to consider what reality truly is? Not the everyday experience of it, but its fundamental essence? The first Hermetic principle provides a startling answer. The all is mind. The universe is mental. This principle is revolutionary in its implications. It doesn't merely suggest that mind is important or that thoughts influence reality. It declares that mind is the fundamental substrate of everything that exists. The entire universe, from vast galaxies to subatomic particles, from your physical body to your subtlest thoughts, exists within what the Hermeticists called the all, an infinite living mind. To grasp this concept, consider how everything you experience, the book in your hands, the sounds around you, the sensations in your body, reaches you through your consciousness. You never experience reality directly. You experience your mind's interpretation of signals received through your senses. Your entire life unfolds within the theater of your consciousness. The principle of mentalism expands this truth to cosmic scale, proposing that the universe itself exists within a greater consciousness. This isn't mere philosophy. It addresses questions that modern science struggles to answer. Physicists have discovered that at the quantum level, particles don't have definite properties until they're observed. The act of observation, a mental activity, appears to collapse quantum possibilities into specific realities. As physicist Sir James Jeans noted, the universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine. The principle of mentalism doesn't negate the material world, but recontextualizes it. Matter isn't denied, but understood as condensed or crystallized thought. Mental energy vibrating at a particular frequency that creates the appearance of solidity. Just as water can exist as vapor, liquid, or ice depending on temperature, Reality manifests in different forms while remaining fundamentally mental in nature. What does this mean practically? It reveals that your thoughts possess far greater power than you may have realized. They're not ephemeral wisps, but causal forces, the primary tools through which you interact with and shape reality. Ancient Hermeticists understood what modern psychological research confirms. Your mental focus literally creates your experienced reality. Consider how two people can experience the identical situation entirely differently based on their mental state. One sees opportunity where another sees obstacle. One finds joy where another finds only frustration. The objective circumstances haven't changed, but the subjective experience, the only reality either person actually knows, differs dramatically. This illustrates how mind shapes reality at an individual level. You can apply this principle through deliberate thought management. Begin by observing your mental patterns without judgment. Notice how certain thoughts create emotional responses that then shape your perceptions and actions. This awareness itself begins to shift your relationship with thought. Next, practice intentional thinking. Rather than allowing thoughts to arise randomly, consciously choose thoughts aligned with your true desires. This isn't simplistic positive thinking, but the disciplined art of mental causation. When negative thoughts arise, as they inevitably will, neither suppress nor indulge them. Instead, observe them with detachment, then deliberately refocus on thoughts that serve your growth. Advanced practice involves recognizing yourself as a thinking center within the greater cosmic mind. Your individual consciousness connects to universal consciousness like a wave to the ocean. This perspective transforms how you approach manifestation. Rather than trying to force external reality to conform to your wishes, you align your individual mind with universal mind, allowing desired outcomes to flow naturally from this alignment. A powerful meditation for working with this principle involves contemplating the statement, "I am in mind, and mind is in me." Sit quietly and allow this paradox to unfold in your awareness. How can you exist within mind while mind simultaneously exists within you? This contemplation gradually dissolves the perceived boundary between your consciousness and universal consciousness. Throughout history, those who mastered this principle achieved remarkable results. From mystics like Meister Eckhart, who experienced unity with the divine mind, to inventors like Nikola Tesla, who received complete technical blueprints through mental visualization. The application of this principle unlocks dormant human capacities. As we move to the next principle, remember that the principle of mentalism forms the foundation upon which all other principles rest. The universe is mental, and your mind is your primary tool for navigating and shaping it. The question becomes, how does this mental universe operate? How do patterns connect across different levels of existence? This brings us to our next principle, the principle of correspondence. Chapter 3, As above, so below, the universal pattern. As above, so below, as below, so above. These 7 simple words contain one of the most profound cosmological insights ever articulated. The principle of correspondence reveals that patterns repeat themselves across all scales and planes of existence, creating an intricate tapestry of interconnected realities. This principle tells us there's always a correspondence between laws and phenomena of various planes of being and life. Picture a fractal. One of those mesmerizing mathematical patterns where each small part replicates the structure of the whole, no matter how far you zoom in or out. Nature abounds with these self-similar patterns. The branching of trees mirrors the branching of rivers and blood vessels. The spiral of a seashell echoes the spiral of a galaxy. The principle of correspondence suggests reality itself functions like a cosmic fractal, with fundamental patterns repeating across all levels of existence. This principle appears across diverse traditions. The Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, finds echoes in the biblical statement that humans are made in the image and likeness of God. Eastern philosophies express it through the concept of the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. These aren't merely poetic analogies, but descriptions of how reality fundamentally operates. The practical power of this principle lies in its application as a tool for understanding. When we comprehend the pattern operating on one plane of existence, we gain insight into corresponding patterns on other planes. This is why ancient physicians studied celestial movements to understand bodily processes, why alchemists saw material transformations as reflections of spiritual development, and why modern physicists find the same mathematical equations describing phenomena at quantum and cosmic scales. Consider three primary planes of existence described in Hermetic philosophy. The physical plane encompasses the material world of objects and physical forces. The mental plane includes thoughts, ideas, and consciousness. The spiritual plane involves the highest principles of reality, what some traditions call divine or ultimate reality. The principle of correspondence tells us that patterns functioning on one plane have analogous expressions on all others. This understanding becomes immediately practical when facing challenges. If you're struggling with a physical issue, perhaps a health condition, you can look for corresponding patterns in your mental and emotional life. Physical tensions often reflect mental stress. Digestive problems might correspond to difficulty digesting life experiences. By addressing the pattern on multiple planes simultaneously, you create comprehensive change. The principle also illuminates personal development. Just as physical muscles grow stronger through resistance training, mental and spiritual capacities develop through challenges that stretch them. The pattern of growth through constructive resistance repeats across all domains of human experience. Understanding this correspondence helps you approach difficulties as opportunities for development rather than obstacles to happiness. In relationships, this principle reveals how your inner world creates your outer experiences. The patterns of thought and feeling you habitually maintain attract corresponding external circumstances. This isn't mystical thinking, but practical psychology. Your mental patterns shape how you perceive opportunities, how you communicate with others, and how you respond to challenges. Change your internal patterns, and external experiences naturally shift in response. To work with this principle, try this visualization exercise. Imagine yourself as a point at the center of three concentric circles representing physical, mental, and spiritual dimensions of your life. See how a change in one circle creates ripple effects through the others. Recognize that by consciously creating change in the dimension most accessible to you, you initiate corresponding shifts throughout your entire being. Another practical application involves using natural correspondences in problem solving. When facing a challenge, look for similar patterns that have been successfully resolved in other contexts. The solution to a business problem might be found by studying biological ecosystems. Insights about personal growth might come from understanding how plants develop. These aren't mere analogies, but manifestations of the same universal patterns in different contexts. The principle of correspondence also offers a method for understanding abstract concepts through tangible analogies. To grasp subtle spiritual or mental principles, look for their physical counterparts. The way water always finds the path of least resistance illustrates how natural energy flows. The transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly demonstrates the pattern of spiritual metamorphosis. As we prepare to explore the principle of vibration, notice how these first two principles interact. If reality is fundamentally mental, and patterns repeat across all levels of existence, then understanding the vibrational nature of thought opens new possibilities for transformation. The cosmos reveals itself not as a random collection of phenomena, but as an elegantly orchestrated pattern expressing itself through infinite variations. A grand symphony playing the same themes across all scales of existence. Chapter 4. The Cosmic Dance. Everything vibrates. Close your eyes for a moment and place your hand over your heart. Feel that rhythmic pulsation. That beating is just one of countless vibrations animating your body right now. Blood pulses, lungs expand and contract, electrons orbit atomic nuclei, and molecules vibrate within every cell. The principle of vibration declares, nothing rests. Everything moves, everything vibrates. This fundamental truth reveals that apparent stillness is merely vibration at an imperceptible rate. Modern science has thoroughly validated this ancient principle. What appears as solid matter dissolves, under scientific scrutiny, into atoms that are mostly empty space containing vibrating particles. Those particles, examined more closely, resolve into vibrating energy fields. Quantum physics describes these vibrations as probability waves, mathematical patterns of potential. Your seemingly solid body is, in reality, an intricate dance of vibrating energy momentarily organized into the pattern you recognize as you. This principle extends beyond the physical realm. Thoughts and emotions are also vibrations, but at frequencies beyond physical measurement. Just as sound creates distinct patterns in sand on a vibrating plate, a phenomenon called cymatics, your thoughts and feelings create distinct patterns in your consciousness and, by extension, your life experience. A thought of gratitude vibrates at a fundamentally different frequency than a thought of resentment, creating entirely different effects. The emotional spectrum represents varying frequencies, from the dense, slow vibrations of despair and apathy to the rapid, refined vibrations of joy and ecstasy. Notice how different emotions literally feel like different frequencies in your body. Depression feels heavy and sluggish. Enthusiasm feels light and energetic. These aren't merely subjective experiences, but actual variations in your energetic vibration. Understanding this principle explains why you're naturally attracted to some people and environments while repelled by others. Like tuning forks resonating at compatible frequencies, you naturally harmonize with energies similar to your own dominant vibration. This is the scientific basis for the familiar saying that like attracts like, a law of vibrational resonance rather than mere metaphor. The practical application of this principle begins with vibrational awareness. Throughout your day, pause periodically to notice the quality of vibration in your body and emotions. Is your energy field contracting or expanding? Does your current vibration feel harmonious or discordant? This awareness alone often initiates natural adjustments toward greater harmony. You can deliberately raise your vibration through multiple pathways. Physical approaches include movement, especially rhythmic activities like dancing or drumming that synchronize bodily vibrations. Certain foods carry higher vibrational energy, particularly fresh fruits and vegetables still containing the life force of recent photosynthesis. Spending time in natural settings with harmonious vibrations, forests, oceans, mountains, automatically entrains your personal vibration to these coherent patterns. Mental approaches to raising vibration include conscious thought selection. Thoughts of appreciation, compassion, and possibility vibrate at higher frequencies than thoughts of judgment, resentment, or limitation. Meditation practices that still mental chatter allow your natural higher vibration to emerge, like removing static from a radio signal to reveal the clear broadcast beneath. Sound offers another powerful vibrational tool. Ancient traditions worldwide use specific tones and chants to alter consciousness. Modern sound healing applies this understanding through instruments like singing bowls or tuning forks calibrated to specific frequencies. Even listening to music that inspires you demonstrably changes your brainwave patterns and, consequently, your overall vibration. To experience vibrational transmission directly, try this. Recall a moment of pure joy or love, allowing that feeling to fill your awareness. Now engage with someone from this vibration and notice how the interaction differs from your normal exchanges. Without saying anything about your internal state, you'll likely observe the other person responding to your vibration, often unconsciously matching it. This simple experiment demonstrates how vibration transfers between individuals without requiring physical mechanisms. Advanced Hermetic practice involves consciously harmonizing your personal vibration with specific qualities you wish to embody. to develop greater compassion. For instance, you would meditate on compassion until you feel its distinct vibration, then practice maintaining that frequency throughout your daily activities. Eventually, this vibration becomes your dominant default state. The relationship between vibration and manifestation reveals itself when we understand that our vibrational state determines which potential realities we actualize from the quantum field of possibilities. Change your vibration, and you literally tune to a different version of reality. Not metaphorically, but actually according to quantum understanding. This explains why maintaining a consistent vibration aligned with your intentions accelerates their manifestation. As we transition to exploring the principle of polarity, notice how these principles build upon each other. The mental universe operates through corresponding patterns expressed through different rates of vibration. These vibrations organize themselves along continuums of polarity, the subject of our next exploration. Everything in creation exists somewhere along these spectrums, with a master hermeticist learning to navigate consciously between opposing poles. Chapter 5. The Unity of Opposites, Finding Balance in Duality. Have you ever noticed how the things that bring you greatest joy can also cause your deepest pain? How love and hate sometimes seem separated by the thinnest of lines. This paradox points directly to the fourth Hermetic principle. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. The principle of polarity reveals that apparent contradictions are actually different manifestations of the same thing. This principle challenges our tendency to think in terms of absolute opposites. Hot and cold appear to be completely different phenomena, yet they're simply varying degrees of the same thing: temperature. Where exactly does hot end and cold begin? It's impossible to define precisely because they're relative points on a continuous spectrum. The same applies to light and darkness, sharp and dull, love and hate, fear and courage. All represent different positions on unified continuums rather than separate phenomena. Eastern philosophy expresses this understanding through the Taoist symbol of yin and yang, opposing forces that contain a seed of their opposite within them and together form a perfect whole. Western traditions capture it in the alchemical maxim solve et coagula, dissolve and coagulate, describing how opposites continuously transform into each other in an eternal dance of becoming. The profound truth of this principle is that opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. This understanding dissolves countless apparent paradoxes and contradictions. Good and evil, different positions on the spectrum of moral development, success and failure, varying points on the continuum of achievement. Even life and death represent phases of a continuous cycle rather than absolute states. This principle offers extraordinary practical power through the art of mental transmutation, the ability to consciously shift from one pole toward its opposite. If you're experiencing fear, understanding that courage is simply the opposite pole of the same continuum means you don't need to somehow eliminate fear and replace it with something different. You simply need to shift your position along a spectrum you already occupy. Consider how this applies to emotional states. Depression and joy exist on the same emotional spectrum. When experiencing depression, you don't need to somehow manufacture joy from nothing. You're already on the joy-depression continuum. By understanding this, you can gradually shift your position through the intermediate points of the spectrum, from depression to sadness to neutrality to contentment to happiness to joy. Each small shift becomes accessible because you're moving along a continuum rather than trying to leap to a completely separate state. The principle operates powerfully in relationships. Love and hate aren't separate emotions, but poles of the same passionate energy, which explains why relationships can sometimes flip from one extreme to the other. Understanding this continuity helps navigate relationship dynamics by recognizing that strong negative feelings often indicate equally strong positive potential if the energy can be transmuted. To apply this principle in daily life, First, practice identifying the underlying continuums behind apparent opposites. When facing any challenging situation or feeling, ask, what is the positive pole of this same energy? Then visualize the complete spectrum connecting these poles, recognizing your current position and the possibility of incremental movement toward the desired pole. The practical technique of polarization involves consciously shifting your mental state along these continuums. If you're experiencing lethargy, don't try to immediately become energetic. That leap may feel impossible. Instead, notice the slightest inclination toward increased energy and focus there, allowing it to gradually expand. This works because you're not creating something new, but amplifying what already exists at a subtle level. Another application involves finding the middle path between extremes, the point of balance where wisdom typically resides. Ancient traditions from Buddhism to Aristotelianism recognized that virtue often lies in the balanced center of a polarity rather than at either extreme. Courage, for instance, represents the balanced center between recklessness and cowardice. By understanding opposing tendencies as parts of a unified spectrum, you can navigate toward this balanced center. A powerful meditation practice involves consciously experiencing both poles of a continuum to transcend their apparent opposition. Begin by fully experiencing one state, perhaps tension, throughout your body and mind. Then gradually shift to experiencing its opposite, relaxation. Move back and forth several times, eventually holding awareness of both simultaneously. This practice dissolves the illusory boundaries between opposites, revealing their essential unity. The principle also illuminates the dynamics of personal growth. Many spiritual traditions describe the path of development as a spiral rather than a straight line, revisiting similar challenges at progressively higher levels of understanding. This pattern occurs because growth often involves integrating apparent opposites: strength with flexibility, confidence with humility, discipline with spontaneity. Each integration represents movement toward the transcendent center point that includes both poles while being limited by neither. Perhaps the most transformative application of this principle involves shifting your perspective during difficult experiences. By understanding that every negative contains the seed of its positive counterpart, you can ask, what is the gift hidden within this challenge? This isn't simplistic positive thinking, but recognition of the principle's fundamental truth that within every pole lies the potential of its opposite. As we conclude our exploration of this principle, notice how it complements the previous principles we've examined. The mental universe creates corresponding patterns across planes of existence. Everything vibrates at different frequencies, and these vibrations organize themselves along continuums of polarity. This intricate system reveals a universe of profound order and purpose, not mechanistic determinism, but living intelligence expressing itself through elegant natural laws. Chapter 6: The Pendulum of Life, Mastering Life Cycles. Have you ever noticed how your energy levels naturally rise and fall throughout the day? Or how your enthusiasm for projects tends to surge forward, then recede, only to advance again later? These aren't random fluctuations, but manifestations of the fifth Hermetic principle, rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. This principle reveals that all existence operates according to cyclical patterns, a cosmic pendulum swing affecting everything from celestial bodies to human emotions. Nature abounds with rhythmic patterns. The ocean tides advance and retreat under lunar influence. Seasons cycle predictably from spring to winter and back again. Even our bodies function through rhythmic systems. The beating heart, the inhale and exhale of breath, the circadian cycles regulating sleep and wakefulness. These aren't merely mechanical processes, but expressions of a universal principle operating across all planes of existence. Human history demonstrates this same pendulum-like movement. Civilizations rise and fall. Economies expand and contract. Cultural values swing between conservatism and progressivism, between materialism and spirituality. Even in your personal life, you've likely experienced periods of prosperity followed by scarcity, enthusiasm followed by apathy, connection followed by solitude. These aren't random events, but manifestations of rhythmic law. The Hermetic understanding of rhythm includes what's called the law of compensation. The principle that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction. The higher the pendulum swings in one direction, the higher it will swing in the return arc. This explains why periods of great suffering are often followed by periods of extraordinary growth, why civilizations reaching extreme decadence often experience dramatic renewal or collapse. Understanding this principle offers tremendous practical advantage. Most people live at the mercy of rhythm's pendulum, experiencing emotional and circumstantial highs and lows without comprehending the underlying pattern. They celebrate the peaks without preparing for the valleys, then despair in the valleys without recognizing another peak approaches. The Hermetic master, however, learns to navigate these rhythms consciously. The first application involves simple awareness. Begin noticing rhythmic patterns in your energy, emotions, relationships, and circumstances. When you're experiencing a peak, recognize that a valley will eventually follow, not as cause for anxiety, but as preparation for skillful navigation. Similarly, when in a valley, remember that the pendulum will inevitably swing back toward a peak, providing hope during difficult periods. The advanced Hermetic technique for working with rhythm is what the Kybalion calls neutralization. This doesn't mean stopping the pendulum, an impossible task, but rising above its effects through mental mastery. When you feel yourself being carried toward an extreme, consciously center yourself at the midpoint of the swing. The pendulum continues its movement, but you maintain mental equilibrium despite external fluctuations. This practice requires developing what Eastern traditions call the witness consciousness, the ability to observe your emotional states without being completely identified with them. When you notice yourself being carried toward excessive excitement or despair, pause and invoke this witnessing awareness. Remind yourself, this is a natural rhythm passing through my experience, not the entirety of who I am. You can also learn to align your actions with favorable rhythms. Just as skilled surfers wait for the right wave, you could develop sensitivity to life's rhythmic patterns and time your efforts accordingly. There are moments when the universe seems to support your endeavors, when doors open easily. These aren't random coincidences, but alignments with favorable rhythmic cycles. By recognizing these patterns, you can invest your energy more effectively. The principle of rhythm naturally connects to our next principle, cause and effect. Every swing of the pendulum represents both the effect of previous causes and the cause of future effects. By understanding this chain of causation, you gain even greater mastery over life's rhythmic movements. The cosmic pendulum doesn't swing randomly, but follows precise universal laws. Laws we'll explore in our next principle. Chapter 7. The Universal Law. Nothing happens by chance. Imagine dropping a pebble into a still pond. You can predict with absolute certainty that ripples will form and expand outward. This simple action demonstrates the sixth Hermetic principle, cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. This principle asserts that chance is merely a name for law not recognized. Nothing in the universe happens randomly or accidentally. Every circumstance, event, and condition follows inevitably from prior causes, whether we perceive those causes or not. This principle operates so universally that we take it for granted in the physical world. Drop an object, and it falls predictably according to gravitational law. Combine hydrogen and oxygen under specific conditions, and water forms. These aren't occasional occurrences, but inevitable consequences following immutable laws. The Hermetic tradition extends this understanding beyond physical phenomena to encompass mental, emotional, and spiritual planes as well. Many spiritual traditions contain variations of this principle. Eastern philosophies express it through the concept of karma, the understanding that actions create corresponding consequences that must eventually manifest. Modern metaphysical traditions like the law of attraction reflect this same principle, teaching that our dominant thoughts and emotions attract corresponding experiences. These aren't supernatural beliefs, but different expressions of the fundamental cause and effect relationship operating throughout existence. What makes the Hermetic understanding particularly valuable is its pragmatic application. Rather than viewing this principle fatalistically, Hermeticists see it as a tool for conscious creation. If every effect follows from some cause, then by becoming deliberate causes, we can generate desired effects. This shifts our relationship with life from passive acceptance to active participation. The first step in applying this principle involves tracing effects back to their causes in your personal life. When you experience an unwanted circumstance, perhaps a financial challenge or relationship difficulty, resist the temptation to blame external factors. Instead, ask, what previous thoughts, actions, or decisions contributed to creating this situation? This isn't about self-blame, but about recognizing causal relationships that might otherwise remain invisible. For instance, financial difficulties often stem from earlier spending patterns, career choices, or limiting beliefs about money. Relationship challenges frequently reflect communication habits, unexamined expectations, or patterns established in early interactions. By identifying these causal factors, you gain insight into what needs changing to create different effects moving forward. The second application involves becoming a conscious cause rather than an unconscious effect. The Kybalion describes how most people function as pawns on the chessboard of life, moved about by forces they neither understand nor control. They react to circumstances buffeted by external causes, wondering why life seems to happen to them. The Hermetic master, by contrast, becomes a player in the game of life, consciously initiating causes aligned with desired outcomes. This transformation begins with mental discipline. Your thoughts and emotions aren't just subjective experiences. They're causal forces generating corresponding effects. By cultivating thoughts of abundance rather than scarcity, compassion rather than judgment, possibility rather than limitation, you initiate causes that inevitably produce different effects in your experience. An effective technique involves visualizing desired outcomes as already accomplished while experiencing the associated emotions. This isn't wishful thinking, but the deliberate establishment of mental causes that, according to Hermetic understanding, must eventually manifest corresponding physical effects. The key lies in consistency, maintaining these mental causes despite temporary contrary appearances in the external world. The principle also operates across multiple planes simultaneously. The Hermeticist understands that causes initiated on higher planes create effects that cascade downward. Spiritual practices that align you with universal principles create mental effects, clarity, inspiration, which produce emotional effects, peace, enthusiasm, which generate physical effects, aligned actions, tangible results. By working at the highest accessible level, you create the most powerful and comprehensive changes. Remember that the principle operates regardless of your awareness or intention. Unconscious habits of thought and behavior initiate causes just as surely as conscious ones. This explains why people often recreate the same patterns despite conscious desires for change. Until you become aware of and transform the unconscious causes you're initiating, you'll continue experiencing similar effects. As we conclude our exploration of this principle, notice how it connects to our next principle, gender. Just as every effect requires a cause, the creative process requires the interaction of masculine and feminine energies. This principle reveals the universal mechanism through which all creation occurs, the final foundational principle of Hermetic philosophy. Chapter 8. Creative Union, the masculine and feminine in all things. When you hear the word gender, your first association might be with biological sex or social identity. But the seventh Hermetic principle presents a far more expansive understanding. Gender isn't everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. This final foundational principle reveals the creative mechanism operating throughout all existence, the generative interplay between complementary energies that produces all manifestation. The principle doesn't refer to physical gender, but to universal creative energies present in everything from atomic particles to cosmic systems. In the Hermetic understanding, masculine energy is directive, projective, and initiating, while feminine energy is receptive, nurturing, and formative. Both energies exist within every person and every natural system, regardless of biological sex. Creation occurs through their balanced interaction. This understanding appears across diverse traditions. In Chinese philosophy, these energies are called yang and yin. Hindu Tantra describes them as Shiva and Shakti. Western alchemy symbolizes them as sun and moon, king and queen. These aren't different concepts, but varied expressions of the same fundamental principle, that creation requires the harmonious interaction of complementary forces. At the cosmic level, this principle explains how the universe continually regenerates itself. The directive masculine principle provides the initial impulse or idea, while the receptive feminine principle gives it form and substance. Neither alone can create. Only through their interaction does manifestation occur. This explains why the universe displays both order and spontaneity, structure and fluidity, consistency and evolution. In human creativity, the same pattern appears. The initial inspiration or vision represents the masculine principle, while the patient development and expression of that vision embodies the feminine principle. Artists, writers, musicians, and innovators of all kinds employ both energies in their creative process, whether consciously or not. Understanding this dynamic allows you to intentionally balance these energies for enhanced creativity. This principle illuminates much about psychological development as well. Each person, regardless of biological sex, contains both masculine and feminine aspects requiring integration for wholeness. The directive masculine provides clarity, focus, and boundary-setting capacities. The receptive feminine offers intuition, relatedness, and nurturing abilities. Psychological health involves honoring and expressing both energies appropriately according to circumstance. Many psychological imbalances stem from over-identification with one energy while suppressing the other. Someone overly identified with masculine energy may become rigid, domineering, and disconnected from emotions. Someone overly identified with feminine energy might lack boundaries, direction, or assertiveness. Balance requires consciously developing whichever energy remains less expressed in your personality. The first step in working with this principle involves recognizing these energies within yourself. Notice when you're expressing directive masculine energy, initiating projects, establishing boundaries, analyzing logically. Observe when you're embodying receptive feminine energy, listening deeply, nurturing relationships, flowing with intuitive guidance. Neither is superior. Both are essential for wholeness. Next, identify which energy you tend to favor and which remains less developed. Most people naturally emphasize one energy based on temperament, cultural conditioning, and life experience. Deliberate growth involves strengthening the underexpressed energy while maintaining the naturally dominant one. This creates internal balance that translates into external effectiveness. For creative projects, consciously employ both energies in appropriate sequence. Begin with the masculine phase of clear vision, structure, and direction. Then allow the feminine phase of receptivity, refinement, and organic development. Complete the cycle with another masculine phase of decisive completion. This rhythmic alternation between energies produces results superior to over-reliance on either energy alone. In relationships, understanding gender principles helps navigate dynamics more skillfully. Rather than relating primarily through biological gender roles, recognize the natural flow of masculine and feminine energies between people regardless of gender identity. Sometimes you'll embody more directive energy, other times more receptive energy. This flexible interchange creates dynamic, evolving relationships rather than static, prescribed roles. The principle extends to spiritual development as well. The conscious mind, with its directive capacity, represents masculine energy. The subconscious mind, with its receptive and manifestational qualities, embodies feminine energy. Effective spiritual practice involves the directive conscious mind programming the receptive subconscious with desired states and conditions. This inner creative partnership mirrors the cosmic creative process. As we conclude our exploration of the 7 foundational principles, we transition naturally to examining their practical application through mental transmutation, the Hermetic art of conscious transformation. These principles aren't merely theoretical concepts, but practical tools for alchemical change. The ancient alchemists weren't only seeking to transform base metals into gold, but more importantly, to transform the lead of lower consciousness into the gold of enlightened awareness. Chapter 9. Hermetic Alchemy, Transforming Lead into Gold Within. The mysterious alchemists of ancient times, hunched over bubbling retorts and cryptic manuscripts, weren't merely attempting to transform physical lead into gold. Their work contained a profound symbolic meaning: the transmutation of human consciousness from base ignorance to spiritual illumination. This inner alchemy represents the practical application of Hermetic principles through what the Kybalion calls mental transmutation, the art of changing and transforming mental states, forms, and conditions. Mental transmutation forms the practical cornerstone of Hermetic philosophy. Understanding the 7 principles intellectually provides a framework, but applying them through mental transmutation creates actual transformation. This practice reveals why Hermetic wisdom has endured for millennia. It works. When applied consistently, these principles produce demonstrable changes in consciousness and circumstances. The connection between mental transmutation and traditional alchemy runs deep. The alchemical maxim, as above, so below, reflects the principle of correspondence. The alchemical process of purification mirrors the mental discipline of clarifying awareness. The philosopher's stone, capable of transforming base metals into gold, symbolizes the transformed consciousness that transmutes ordinary experience into spiritual insight. The ancient alchemists clothed spiritual teachings in metallurgical language to preserve their wisdom while avoiding persecution. The foundational technique of mental transmutation involves consciously shifting from one mental state to another. Most people experience thoughts and emotions as if they simply happen, arising automatically in response to external triggers. The Hermetic practitioner recognizes these mental states as positions on a continuum that can be intentionally adjusted through applied will. Rather than being controlled by mental states, you learn to control them. This practice begins with the principle of mentalism, recognizing that all mental states exist within mind and are therefore amenable to mental influence. It employs the principle of polarity, understanding that undesirable states can be transmuted into their opposites by moving along the appropriate spectrum. It applies the principle of rhythm, neutralizing negative rhythmic swings through mental discipline. In this way, multiple principles combine in practical application. A specific technique for mental transmutation involves what might be called alchemical breathing. When experiencing an unwanted mental state, perhaps anxiety or frustration, breathe in deeply while visualizing universal light entering your consciousness. Hold the breath briefly while mentally declaring your intention to transmute the current state. As you exhale, visualize the unwanted state dissolving into the universal mind to be recycled into higher energy. Repeat this process until you feel a tangible shift in consciousness. Another powerful technique employs visualization based on the principle of correspondence. Identify the mental state you wish to transform. Then find a corresponding physical process that represents the desired transformation. If working to transform confusion into clarity, You might visualize muddy water gradually settling until it becomes crystal clear. If transmuting fear into courage, visualize ice melting into flowing water. The physical image provides a template that your consciousness naturally follows. Advanced mental transmutation involves what the Kybalion calls the art of polarization, consciously positioning yourself at different points along mental continuums. Rather than being fixed at habitual positions on spectrums like love/hate, courage/fear, or abundance/scarcity, you develop the ability to shift your position at will. This creates extraordinary flexibility in responding to life circumstances, allowing you to occupy whatever mental position serves highest purpose in any situation. The ultimate goal of mental transmutation isn't merely improving comfort or circumstances, though these naturally result from the practice. The deeper purpose involves self-mastery, developing conscious control over previously automatic mental and emotional responses. This mastery creates freedom from unconscious conditioning, allowing authentic choice rather than programmed reaction. In Hermetic terms, you become a player in the game of life rather than a pawn moved by external forces. The process requires patience and persistence. Just as physical alchemy allegedly required repeated distillations and purifications, mental transmutation involves repeated application of Hermetic principles to increasingly subtle levels of consciousness. Each success builds upon previous achievements, gradually transforming your entire relationship with reality. The beginner might use these techniques to transmute temporary emotional states. The advanced practitioner transmutes fundamental perceptions of self and world. As we explore mental transmutation, we discover that the 7 principles don't operate in isolation, but form an integrated system. The principle of mentalism establishes that reality is fundamentally mental. Correspondence reveals patterns connecting all levels of existence. Vibration explains how different frequencies create different manifestations. Polarity shows how apparent opposites connect along continuums. Rhythm reveals cyclic patterns in all phenomena. Cause and effect demonstrates how causes generate corresponding effects. Gender illuminates the creative process through complementary energies. This integrated understanding forms the foundation for advanced Hermetic practice. By applying these principles together through mental transmutation, you develop increasing mastery over your mental states, emotional responses, and ultimately, your life circumstances. This isn't magical thinking, but the practical application of universal laws operating throughout existence. As we prepare to conclude our exploration of Hermetic principles, we turn to their practical application in everyday modern life. These ancient teachings weren't designed solely for mystics and philosophers, but for anyone seeking greater understanding and mastery of life's challenges and opportunities. The wisdom of the Kybalion translates seamlessly into contemporary contexts, offering practical guidance for navigating today's complex world with greater awareness and effectiveness. Chapter 10. Ancient Wisdom from Modern Times. Practical Applications. The ancient scrolls containing Hermetic wisdom may be yellowed with age, but their teachings have never been more relevant than in our fast-paced, complex modern world. Today's challenges, information overload, technological acceleration, environmental concerns, social fragmentation, make these timeless principles not merely interesting philosophical concepts, but essential tools for navigating contemporary life with wisdom and purpose. Far from being abstract theories, Hermetic principles offer practical guidance for addressing modern challenges. The principle of mentalism reminds us that in a world bombarding us with external stimuli and distractions, our most powerful resource remains our own consciousness. The principle of correspondence helps us recognize patterns connecting seemingly disparate phenomena, crucial in an age of specialization and information silos. The principle of vibration explains how our internal frequencies affect our experience more fundamentally than external circumstances. Integrating these principles into daily routines begins with simple awareness practices. Start your day with a brief reflection on which principle feels most relevant to current challenges. Perhaps you're facing difficult negotiations and need the balanced perspective of polarity. Maybe you're launching a creative project and would benefit from conscious application of gender principles. This morning contemplation attunes your awareness to the operating principles behind the day's experiences. Throughout your day, pause periodically to notice how these principles manifest in ordinary situations. Observe how different mental states, mentalism, create different perceptions of identical circumstances. Notice rhythmic patterns, rhythm, in energy levels, productivity, and interactions. Recognize cause-effect relationships, cause and effect, operating in projects and relationships. These brief moments of Hermetic awareness gradually transform your understanding of reality's underlying mechanisms. In decision-making, consciously apply multiple principles for optimal outcomes. When facing an important choice, consider, how does my mental state, mentalism, influence how I'm perceiving the situation? What patterns, correspondence from past experiences might inform this decision? What causes cause and effect am I initiating through this choice, and what effects might follow? This multi-principled analysis leads to wiser decisions aligned with universal laws rather than temporary expediency. Modern relationships particularly benefit from Hermetic understanding. Apply the principle of polarity to recognize that apparent conflicts often represent different positions on shared continuums, allowing you to find common ground rather than opposition. Use the principle of vibration to consciously shift your emotional frequency before difficult conversations, creating resonance rather than discord. Apply the principle of gender to understand the natural flow of directive and receptive energies between people regardless of gender identity. Career and work life transform through Hermetic application as well. The principle of cause and effect helps you trace professional outcomes back to their causal factors, revealing what needs adjustment for different results. The principle of rhythm helps you recognize natural cycles of productivity and rest, allowing you to align efforts with favorable rhythms rather than fighting against natural ebbs and flows. The principle of correspondence helps you see how patterns in one business context might apply beneficially in another. Creating a personal Hermetic practice need not be complicated. Begin with a morning contemplation of one principle and an evening reflection on how you observed it operating throughout your day. Gradually add specific applications, perhaps a midday mental transmutation practice for shifting unwanted states, or a weekly review of rhythmic patterns in your life. The key lies not in elaborate rituals, but in consistent awareness and application. Modern science continues validating many Hermetic insights, creating bridges between ancient wisdom and contemporary understanding. Quantum physics confirms aspects of the principle of mentalism through discoveries about the observer effect. Systems theory echoes the principle of correspondence in its recognition of repeating patterns across different scales and contexts. Psychology increasingly acknowledges principles of mental transmutation through practices like cognitive restructuring and mindfulness. The ultimate purpose of living hermetically isn't merely improving personal circumstances, though this naturally occurs. The deeper aim involves becoming a conscious participant in your own evolution, developing awareness of the universal laws operating through your life and aligning yourself deliberately with them. This creates not just outer success, but inner harmony, not just material achievement, but spiritual unfoldment. As we conclude our exploration of Hermetic principles, remember that this knowledge becomes wisdom only through application. The ancient Hermeticists distinguished between knowledge, information possessed, and understanding, information applied. True comprehension comes not from intellectually grasping these principles, but from living them, testing them in a laboratory of daily experience, and discovering their validity through personal verification. The path of Hermetic living doesn't separate you from ordinary life, but enhances your engagement with it. You continue participating in work, relationships, and society, but with greater awareness of the principles operating beneath surface appearances. This awareness transforms ordinary existence into a sacred journey of discovery, where each experience reveals another facet of universal wisdom operating through the particulars of your life. We've journeyed together through the 7 Hermetic principles of the Kybalion, exploring ancient wisdom that offers profound insights into the nature of reality and our place within it. These principles reveal a universe of order, purpose, and meaning, not a random collection of events, but an elegantly structured system operating according to comprehensible laws. By understanding and applying these principles, you gain unprecedented agency in shaping your experience and contributing consciously to life's unfolding. The principle of mentalism establishes the fundamental mental nature of reality, revealing consciousness as the primary creative force rather than a secondary byproduct. The principle of correspondence shows how patterns repeat across all levels of existence, connecting microcosm and macrocosm through recognizable relationships. The principle of vibration explains how varying frequencies create the diverse manifestations we experience as reality, from physical objects to thoughts and emotions. The principle of polarity reveals the continuums connecting apparent opposites, showing how seemingly contradictory states actually represent different positions on unified spectrums. The principle of rhythm illuminates the cyclic patterns governing all phenomena, from cosmic cycles to personal experiences. The principle of cause and effect demonstrates the lawful relationship between actions and consequences across all planes of existence. The principle of gender explains the creative interplay of complementary energies generating all manifestation. Together, these principles form a comprehensive framework for understanding existence and navigating life with wisdom. They aren't merely theoretical concepts, but practical tools for transformation. Through mental transmutation, the conscious application of these principles, you develop increasing mastery over your mental states, emotional responses, and ultimately, your life's circumstances and contribution. Remember that these principles operate whether you're aware of them or not, just as gravity affects everything regardless of our understanding or belief. By becoming conscious of these laws and aligning yourself with them, you work with universal currents rather than against them. This creates not just greater effectiveness, but deeper harmony, a life of purpose aligned with cosmic principles. As you continue exploring and applying these teachings, remain both open-minded and discerning. Test these principles through personal experience rather than accepting them on authority. The true Hermetic approach involves neither blind belief nor cynical rejection, but thoughtful application and observation. Let your own experience reveal the validity and value of these ancient insights. The wisdom of the Kybalion offers something increasingly rare in our fragmented modern world, a coherent understanding of reality that integrates physical, mental, and spiritual dimensions of existence. By recognizing how these dimensions interconnect through universal principles, you develop a more comprehensive understanding of yourself and your place in the cosmic order. This understanding naturally translates into more conscious living and greater contribution to humanity's evolution. Thank you for exploring these ancient Hermetic secrets with us. If you found value in these teachings, please subscribe to Audiobook's library for more wisdom from the world's great philosophical and spiritual traditions.